My name is Father Nathaniel Brooks, and I've been a priest for, well, longer than some folks have been alive. I've seen a lot during my years of service, and I've heard even more through the confessional. I thought I'd seen it all, that nothing could truly surprise me anymore. That was before I met Kimberly Monroe. It was a Tuesday. Tuesdays are usually calm around St. Luke's Parish. I had taken the day to run a few errands, one of which was picking up some fresh frankincense and myrrh for the upcoming service. Only the best for the altar. I stopped by Miss Eliza's Botanica, a charming little shop tucked into a strip mall beside a nail salon that perpetually smelled like burnt popcorn. I was dressed casually, black polo shirt, khaki slacks, and my favorite cross necklace. I probably looked more like a retired coach than a man of God, but comfort is important when you're on your feet all day. As I exited the shop, incense bag in hand, I spotted a woman struggling to lift a ridiculously oversized garden gnome into her SUV. This gnome wasn't your average lawn ornament. No, this one looked like it deadlifted ATVs for fun. Naturally, being helpful is part of the calling, so I offered, "Need a hand with that, ma'am?" That's when Kimberly Monroe turned around. Kimberly was, let's say, your textbook suburban gatekeeper. Helmet-like frosted hair, oversized designer sunglasses barely hanging on the bridge of her nose, a bright orange spray tan that looked more artificial than sincere. Her entire aura screamed entitlement. She looked me up and down, her expression one of barely masked disgust. "Are you even allowed to be in this neighborhood?" she asked, suspicion dripping from her voice. I blinked. I live just a few blocks over, and yes, ma'am, I'm allowed to be anywhere I please. "Oh, really? Because you look suspicious. Probably loitering up to no good." I sighed inwardly. "I was simply offering to help you with the gnome." "A likely story," she sneered. "What's in a bag?" She pointed to my incense. "Drugs? You selling to the kids?" I held up the small paper bag. "Frankincense and myrrh, ma'am." "Incense? For church?" "Yeah, right," she scoffed. "I'm calling the police." "You just wait." Before I could respond, she had already pulled out her phone. "Yes, hello, 911. I'm at the Elm Street Strip Mall, and there's a suspicious black man loitering. He claims he's got incense, which is clearly code for something, and he was trying to shove a garden gnome into my car." I could hear the operator's bewildered tone even from where I stood. "Ma'am, are you in immediate danger? I feel unsafe. He's giving off a very threatening vibe. Send someone immediately." Within minutes, a squad car pulled into the lot. Two officers stepped out, Officer Janelle Reyes, young and alert, and Officer Greg Simmons, older, tired but observant. Kimberly rushed to them like a contestant on a game show. "Officers, he's harassing me. He was lurking around the shop and tried to follow me." Officer Reyes approached me calmly. "Sir, can I see some ID?" "Of course," I said, handing over both my driver's license and clergy ID. "Father Nathaniel Brooks." She inspected them, and a slight smile played at her lips. "Everything looks good here, Father." Meanwhile, Officer Simmons was listening to Kimberly's continued tirade. "Did he threaten you, ma'am?" "Well, no," she admitted reluctantly. "But he's suspicious. And who's ever heard of a black priest? That did it." "With all due respect," I said, my voice firm now, "my race has nothing to do with my calling. African-American priests have served faithfully for generations." Officer Reyes gave Kimberly a cold look. "Ma'am, you called 911 because a man offered to help you with your garden gnome and was holding a bag of incense. That's not an emergency. That's misuse of 911. "But," she started. Officer Simmons cut in. "Ma'am, I suggest you take a breath and reconsider how you interact with your neighbors. We're letting you off with a warning, but this could easily be a citation." Kimberly, purple-faced, yanked the gnome in her SUV, slammed the door, and peeled out of the lot without another word. Officer Reyes turned to me. "Sorry about that, Father. Some people. No harm done," I replied with a smile. "And thank you for handling it professionally. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong." The next morning, Miss Eliza from the Botanica called me. "Father Brooks," she whispered, "you won't believe what I just heard." "What's going on, Miss Eliza?" "That woman you helped, Kimberly Monroe? She's been coming to my shop for years. Buys all sorts of, shall we say, peculiar items. and she talks a lot, especially when she's trying to recruit folks into her wellness pyramid scheme. But this morning, I heard from a friend who works at the courthouse. Kimberly's under investigation for embezzling money from her real estate firm. She's been funneling funds into a personal account for years. And her husband? Been cheating on her with a woman half her age at the country club. My eyebrows raised. That's significant. Apparently, someone finally blew the whistle. Everything's unraveling. I did some digging of my own. I have parishioners in all walks of life. It didn't take long to confirm what Miss Eliza said. Kimberly was the regional manager of a high-end real estate firm downtown. She was notorious for underhanded deals and toxic office culture. The investigation into her embezzlement was serious. And yes, her husband had indeed moved out and into the condo of a young tennis instructor. That Sunday, I crafted my sermon with more intention than usual. I spoke about the dangers of pride, the burden of prejudice, and the ways in which karma, or divine justice, can manifest when we least expect it. I didn't name Kimberly, of course, but I painted a picture that everyone could see. After the service, a few members approached me. "That was quite the sermon, Father," one said, eyes twinkling. Timely, too. The following Thursday, the other shoe dropped. Kimberly Monroe was arrested at her office. The charges were numerous: embezzlement, fraud, and obstruction. The story went viral across local news outlets. Her firm fired her immediately. Her husband publicly filed for divorce. And a few days later, I ran into her at the grocery store. Rather, she found me. She lunged at me, shouting about how I had ruined her life. I stepped back as store security intervened. She was arrested again, this time for assault and violating bail conditions. The judge revoked her bail entirely. I felt a flicker of pity, I admit. Watching someone's life collapse is never pleasant. But then I remembered her lies, her hate, and the way she tried to weaponize law enforcement against me. My sympathy faded like the last wisp of incense on a windy day. A week later, a letter arrived. From Kimberly. It was a rambling mix of denials, self-justifications, and twisted accusations. She claimed I had cursed her life. But buried in the mess was a surprising admission. She confessed to some of the financial misconduct, blaming stress and jealousy. I redacted the letter and sent it to a local journalist I trusted. The resulting article drew even more attention. Kimberly Monroe became a cautionary tale, mocked online, discussed on late-night shows, and publicly shamed. Do I feel guilty? Maybe a little. But Kimberly made her choices. She built her life on arrogance, greed, and falsehoods. And she aimed that poison at me, a priest trying to help with a gnome. I haven't heard from her since. Maybe she's in prison. Maybe she's in therapy. Maybe she's learned something. I honestly hope she has. As for me, I've gone back to my calling, preaching, listening, guiding. I still visit Miss Eliza's Botanica. Still buy frankincense and myrrh. Still help strangers with oversized garden gnomes. The lesson? Don't judge by appearances. And never underestimate a man of faith, especially one with friends in journalism and top-shelf incense. Because sometimes karma doesn't knock. It rings the bell, walks in, and lights a candle at the altar.